let me ask you something that often comes up in news reports about the B2B industry, asset heavy versus asset light. So what side are you on? Do you have trucks on the road trucking things?
No, we're asset light, but it's not a particular philosophy. We will do whatever it takes to deliver. I think from a design point of view, asset light is harder, but from an implementation point of view and scalability point of view, it's superior. So you just eat the pain and design the right system. You're going to have a lot of failures in the beginning, but over time you iterate and improve the system. So we're asset light, but it's not a philosophy. It's just it works best for the scale we are.
Good afternoon. My name is Alex, like Chidi said, and I'm very pleased to be in the middle of two giants of the B2B space, Anu, the CEO of Sabi, and Mudiaga, the CEO of Matta. I don't know what you know about B2B, but it's one of the biggest sectors when it comes to tech in Africa. And these two players are two of the biggest. And what we want to find out from them today is what the future is in terms of leaps and bounds. How do they make money from this sector? But perhaps more importantly, how do they make money for those of you in the audience who are in the B2B space, those of you who have mom and pop stores, but also those of you who are in really big businesses? What is the future of the sector? I will start with Anu. What does Sabi do?
Okay, so Sabi is a platform that enables businesses in the informal or unstructured space to grow, primarily in distribution. So we provide route-to-market solutions. We have two lead products. One is Market, which is oriented around local distribution solutions in the FMCG and related spaces. And our largest product is Trace, which is connecting local supply chains, primarily in agriculture and minerals, to global demand. So we're basically plugging local players into very large offtake agreements all over the world.
Right. Mudiaga, same question, but with a twist. Who do you serve in particular?
So basically, Matta is a marketplace for chemicals, raw materials, ingredients, and commodities. The two major counterparties that we serve are your suppliers on your chemical side, so the guys who have the inputs, and the guys who require the inputs, who are primarily the manufacturers. And so we've created a central platform where they can trade, have access to financing, and logistics when they need it.
Right. I'm going to read something one of Mudiaga's investors wrote as a reason for investing in the company. The investor said Mudiaga told him that he'll be building the baddest company Africa has ever seen. Why did you say that?
So when you look at the space we deal in, right, globally, it's actually quite massive. And like I was saying to you beforehand, everything that exists that isn't naturally occurring requires input, right? And in trying to platform that industry in Africa, it is inevitable that we would be touching the lives of everyone on the continent eventually. Right. That is why I said that.
So chemicals affect everything.
Yes. Basically.
My shoes, this microphone, everything comes from a chemical. For you, Anu, do you have that specific focus on a product, or are you a generalist in terms of what you handle?
So we're focused on three value chains, FMCG, minerals, and agriculture. But in terms of focus, it's very much on the informal or unstructured sector. And for us, it's all about growth and value addition. What activities can we accelerate, or where can we basically intervene that help businesses kind of find that kind of exponential dynamic? So for instance, right now, with the situation with FX in Nigeria, one of our biggest focuses has been on plugging businesses into international offtake, because then they can earn dollars or euros or whatever, right? So for us, three value chains, but the focus is always on growth. How do we help these businesses grow? Yeah.
I think you mentioned the informal sector. What's the informal sector? Because I don't even know what it is.
Okay, so when you think about the informal sector, first of all, if we look at Nigeria, 85% of Nigeria, quote and unquote, is informal. But if you look at even in South Africa, depending on this data, you look at 40 to 60%. But it's really about the business's structure. Like, how structured are they to be able to work with structured players, with institutional players? So for instance, right now, Africa holds 30% of, strategic minerals in the world. But we're one of the lowest suppliers globally, right? Now, we're enabling businesses to kind of plug into the energy transition globally. So, but if you look at the aggregators and so on that we work with, they're not highly structured, they're not documented, they don't have collateral, etc. If you have an agreement for, let's say, 10,000 tons of, let's say, lithium, right? A small aggregator somewhere in Oyo State cannot, there's no way they're supplying into that. But what we can do is work to standardize different players in that value chain. Okay, this is the way you need to move, this is where you need to deliver. Work with aggregators, whatever processing is required, and then plug them into that contract. On a micro level, none of those players are structured enough to meet that kind of global opportunity. But when we structure the value chain and work with different infrastructure, finance, logistics players, then we can standardize them in a way that they then meet those structured requirements. So the best way to think about informal is more the way the business runs as opposed to any particular part of the sector or any particular type of business.
Right. So the informal sector, they don't necessarily have the right structures to plug into the markets that they can access. What does the informal sector look like in the chemicals space?
I think it's basically the same thing. So it's the nature in which the business is run. But then you also have to understand that our primary focus isn't just on the informal sector, because one of the biggest hang-ups that manufacturers have in Africa is access to supply. So a lot of the time, they don't even know where to get the supply, right? You have these suppliers who don't know where the demand is because the whole market is fragmented. So our focus isn't necessarily on formalizing an informal sector, even though if you look at the chemical space at large, you would tend it to be informal. But it is basically creating visibility across the value chain that makes it easy for manufacturers to find all the raw materials they require and for the suppliers to know exactly where the demand is.
Maybe we make this a bit more concrete for people.
Yeah.
So you deal with chemicals.
Yeah.
You're plugging people who produce chemicals to manufacturers who need them.
Yes, basically.
Why are you necessary? Why can't the manufacturers talk to the producers directly? Why do you have to be in that space?
So to talk to the producers, you even need to know who the producers are. And one thing you find is that the nature of the African market creates opacity across the value chain. So a lot of the time you have guys who've been in the market for 20, 30, 40 years, and when they want to source raw materials, the way they do it is by sending a message to some agents that they know, I'm looking for this, can you help me find it? There is no guarantee they will find what they want as and when they need it. There's also no guarantee that what they want is existent in the market, because a lot of the suppliers don't even know that the kind of demand that the manufacturers have exists in that market. So by creating visibility, you then open channels for the manufacturers to speak to the suppliers directly. So basically what you said is what we're trying to achieve.
For you, Anu, if you are connecting retailers to people who, like the big companies, what are the pain points those retailers are looking to solve? Like the mom and pop stores or whoever it is that you are targeting directly, what are the main things that they need you for?
I think it's more about specialization and technicality, right? You're referring to mom and pop stores, but the better way to think of the actual client is not necessarily the smallest part of the value chain, but the largest, right? And the technicality is in how do you bulk make or bulk break in a standardized way.
Bulk make or bulk break?
Because the thing is with value chains, things are either flowing down or they're flowing up. So with chemicals, for instance, right, basically you have a bunch of materials that are going to large off-takers. So it's basically enterprise to enterprise levels trade, not even necessarily B2B, right? And if you look at a specialized chemical, what type of transport do you need, etc., like how do you even access it? Most of the time, what you're solving are supply problems, not actually demand problems. Do you see? So either you're bulk making or you're bulk breaking, and you then have two clients on two sides. And the thing is, how are you passing? It's almost like a communication problem. This large business operates this way and is used to speaking this language. And all these small guys, they speak this way, and this is the language they understand. And you have to understand both to help it translate. But the way that you make it translate is in the form of actual value. So that's logistics, finance, tools, etc. And what you're doing is, to be honest, it sounds like a simplification, but it's very much a queue management solution. So what you're doing is you're trying to understand the value chains as purely as you can, and basically designing solutions that translate the standardization of a particular process. So for instance, if you look at cocoa, right? The EU has introduced these new rules, EUDR, right? They have traceability requirements, sustainability requirements, a lot of ESG stuff. You're not going to go to a cocoa farmer somewhere and tell them that, listen, you need to meet these requirements. No. But what I can do is have a very simple app or USSD solution through which the farmer communicates certain information to me. And I can make sure that the flow of that information works such that if they do match my system, they are meeting those requirements on a disaggregated level. And then on the back end, the Sabi team will basically be aggregating the requirements across all those players to meet one massive off-taker in the EU's needs. Do you see? So that's basically what we do. Both of us, by the way.
So for you, the main client is the big guy, not necessarily the as you said, the retailers.
The main client is the big guy because the big guy is paying in dollars or euros.
Okay.
But if I'm not enabling the small guy to grow with ease in a way that they understand, they're not sustainable, I'm not going to get that supply next year.
Right.
So it's both sides. It's just a matter of prioritization and organization.
Let me ask you something that often comes up in news reports about the B2B industry, asset heavy versus asset light. So what side are you on? Do you have trucks on the road, trucking things?
No, we're asset light, but it's not a particular philosophy. We will do whatever it takes to deliver. It's just that I think from a design point of view, asset light is harder, but from an implementation point of view and scalability point of view, it's superior. So you just eat the pain and design the right system. You're going to have a lot of failures in the beginning, but over time you iterate and improve the system. So we're asset light, but it's not a philosophy. It's just it works best for the scale we are.
I'm asking you the same question, Mudiaga, because I think you're dealing with chemicals, sensitive, toxic. It seems to me that you should be asset heavy. You should have trucks.
No, so we're also asset light. But then you see, being asset light, like she said, comes with its own set of complications. Because, for example, like you just mentioned, when we first started, first of all, we don't move, there's a very limited number of very toxic chemicals that we move just because of regulation around that. But when we first started, there were certain chemicals, certain raw materials that we had to move. And because we're asset light, the idea is that you partner with a logistics service provider that can move those chemicals for you. And what you then find out that you're doing in trying to build that process is that you're also trying to aggregate suppliers of trucks for your logistics service providers. Because you're like, listen, I want to move ammonia, I need this kind of tank. He has no idea where to get that. But because you're in the industry, you understand where to get it from. So you go to that guy, listen, I have this guy, he needs to move this for me. Can you make your trucks available to him? So it comes with its own set of complexities, but long term, I think it's much easier. Implementation is difficult, but it's easier to deal with.
Do you have a lot of control over what happens in that value chain if you don't have trucks, if you depend on other people to move the things? How do you control the various points of failure that can be?
So you have to have control. In Matta, we have a QA/QC team, and we have a logistics team, right? And the prime purpose of those teams is to make sure that the chemicals and the raw materials we source are up to the standard of the manufacturers who use them. And for logistics, is to make sure that the logistics service providers that we deal with are able to meet the terms of engagement that will allow us to deliver the goods we need to deliver timely and in the right manner. So there's a lot of sensitivity that goes with delivering the kind of things that we do. It just means it might be more difficult for you to move the kind of volumes that you have demand for, right? Because you have to limit what you're moving because of the limitations from a logistics perspective, for instance, right? But you make do with what you have and you keep building. And the thing is, the moment people begin to see value in your processes, right? All of a sudden, everybody begins to align. So then you now have other logistics service providers come to you like, listen, we want to do business with you. We're like, yeah, but this is the kind of equipment we need. This is the demand we have. They're like, okay, fine, we'll invest in that because we want to do business with you. So it's a knock-on effect within the whole ecosystem.
Still on challenges, Anu, if I think of trade or commerce in Nigeria, one of the things that comes to my mind now, unfortunately, is that you can't reliably travel by road in this country for security reasons, and otherwise the roads are bad. And I guess that affects trade and commerce as well. Is that a point of failure in your business? How do you manage it?
I mean, so look, the way to think about this thing is anything you see, you will deal with it. South Africa has its own issues, right? In the townships, there are certain things you can't move anyhow, or you can only move with logistics from the community. If not, you'll get jacked. In certain parts, this is South Africa, right? Zambia has its own issues. Tanzania has its own issues. Nigeria, yeah, we do have our own issues. But to be honest, I wouldn't even say insecurity affects commerce in as much as the amount of levies and fees on the way. Yeah. Do you see what I'm saying? Yeah. But what you do is you just have to build the infra around it. There's no way. And I think the benefit of these markets is that they do have, so the visibility problem Mudia was referring to, that opacity, right, does create opportunity in terms of margin. So there's definitely infrastructure challenges, but even in those infrastructure challenges, there's opportunities. As a business, you decide whether you're facing them or not, but what you see is what you get. So you have to design for what you have, and you just find a solution. But it's always about standardization, queue management, and implementation, consistency of follow-up. So for instance, there's technology solutions, for instance, stickers, codes, etc. you can use to solve transport tracking and so on. It involves a lot of innovation, but they are solvable problems.
I want to, and we're concluding now, to zoom out a bit. The future. What kinds of technologies should we be looking at if we want to improve the opportunity in trade and commerce in Africa?
I think two things come to mind. So first of all, the energy transition is a massive thing. I think Africa is uniquely well placed to plug into global dynamics, the supply chain changes happening all over the world with the energy transition. We have the minerals, we have the agricultural commodities, etc. And so we're laser focused on sustainability and having flows and product solutions that enable businesses to plug into those demand flows. I think that's a massive thing. It's where all the global funds are going. When I say global funds, I don't mean like investments. I mean literally demand from the biggest manufacturers and so on, right? Sustainability is massively important right now. All our products are addressing traceability or sustainability issues. That's one. And two is obviously AI. And when I say AI, I don't mean AI, I think like in terms of AI as an esoteric topic. I think people don't understand like AI has introduced a new type of sentience to the world. It kind of changes how one might think of intelligence and what's possible. But it also does something very peculiar. It enables a new type of engagement. One of the biggest problems you have when dealing with the informal sector is communication and engagement, because digitalization involves behavioral change. AI bridges that gap. And so for us, we're massively focused on changing our channels and building for channels that users already use, but using AI to bridge the standardization gap so that our databases can consume it in a standardized way. For us, I think that's where the future is at, especially for Africa, because no matter how digitalized you want to be, when it comes down to it, these are highly local dynamics, right? And they're offline dynamics.
What's a real-world AI application that you are currently considering?
Not currently considering, they're built. I think for us right now, the two most important ones are any communication tools. So for instance, in FMCG, which I haven't spoken about much today, one of the biggest things is just placing orders, tracking supply through WhatsApp. It's like you're chatting with a bot, but the thing is, the AI is almost filling a form. So we're not changing our fundamental technology, it's just bridging communication. And then I think the second thing is really just everything around traceability. So we've built our traceability solutions differently. So our data structures work a bit differently now because AI enables that. It can be a bit more flexible, and that works well for lower parts of the value chain, in agric especially, which we didn't have standardized solutions to before.
Okay. Mudiaga, we were talking earlier, you're in 5 countries.
Currently, yeah.
Currently in 5 countries. Yeah. Is there a role for technology in helping people who want to trade chemicals between these countries? What current role does technology play, and what future role can it play?
No, of course. The whole idea of building the platform was to create an ecosystem that's very Africa-focused from a demand perspective. Within the ecosystem, in multiple countries, people can trade. So the ecosystem or the platform isn't localized to any particular country. The idea of the platform is that you can trade from, in fact, the whole idea of the platform is to open up all the various markets to each other. And I mean, there's a funny story there.
Is it a story about onions?
Yes, it's a story about onions. There's a funny story I was going to tell about onions. So when we started in Senegal, we had, our partner from Senegal came to Nigeria, and I'd asked him, like, look, we're doing this in Senegal, what else can we do in Senegal? And he said, okay, would you want to do onions? And I'm like, well, I mean, not us, but we have, I mean, so I thought about Anu, I was like, it's something they could potentially do. And I said, so what's your onion demand in Senegal? And he said, they use $500 million worth of onions in Senegal per annum, which was a crazy number to me. And he's like, we imported from France, which was even crazier, right? So I got back to, my team knows that I can be a bit crazy. So I go back to the office, I mentioned it to Anu, I said on my team, I was like, listen guys, we're going to start exporting onions to Senegal. And we actually did one cargo, right? The point of the story is that they go all the way to France to bring in onions, but the onions exist in Gombe State here in Nigeria. The idea of platforms is to open up, is to remove opacity within value chains, not just within the locality of countries.
I think there are some people in the audience who might want to work in a B2B company, maybe even Sabi. What do you tell them about the challenge and the opportunity?
Let me make sure I understand. The question is, if you wanted to work at a business like
They
Sabi or Matta,
Yes.
how would you get a job?
No, they want to come work for you.
Yeah.
What do you tell them about the work to be done?
I mean, it's hard. I feel like people forget that work is like a privilege. Like a lot of the time, sometimes, I don't know if it's because of social media, people feel as though you're entitled to just come to work and appear and be. I'm like, that's not how it is at Sabi. And as far as I know as Matta, like work is a privilege. Like the dichotomy between work and life is very slim if you're serious. And it's like, if you want to solve the type of solutions, solve the type of problems we're solving, you're going to be serious. Like, it's a lot of fun, actually. Like, Olumide and co always go out and party. But, like, you must deliver first. And I feel like we live in a world that sometimes allows people to have the delusion that, like, you can kind of middle ground and just find some kind of sexy solution by magic. No, you're going to, like, roll your sleeves up. And this is going to be, like, all day, all night for a while. And then you get to sleep for, like, 2 hours, and then you go again.
Thank you very much, Anu, and thank you, Mudiaga, for your time. Thank you, everybody. And
Thank you. Thank you
see
so much.
Thank you.